Hey guys. Good morning. We're almost done with this early morning crap, you know? We're close to done. For you guys, this is probably late night crap. You're probably still up. Whoa, whoa, Matt. That's stunning. Yeah, nice. Yeah, no, it's tough. Yeah, I was actually up at six something. I won't reveal, but six something this morning, which is not bad. I was kind of with all this working from home, no commute. I was kind of drifting back to my college days. In terms of schedule, not in terms of like, you know, health or attractiveness or anything like that, but nocturnal. Right. Well, I had some white hair back then, uh, but I was fully nocturnal like all good college students back in the day. You know, and I was definitely, the kind where you like call a buddy up at midnight and you don't even think about it because you're just like, do you want to go get something? You know. Yes, that's right. That's right. Or back in my day, where we had well, by the time I was in college, it was probably at least push button phones, but they were still stuck to the wall for the most part. It was like, well, the first time it was the late 70s, and the next time I was in college, it was the early 80s, you know. So, hey, everybody rolling in. 9 so far. Everyone's got to get out of bed. It's still only 8:30. Uh, Oh man, no, but that was back in the in the anyway, just to date myself and play the old guy, But yeah, no caller ID. The phone would just ring and you would just like answer it, because you didn't know what else to do. Hey, hold on, I'm gonna grab something. I have to grab some liquid, and I shall be right back. We're at 10 viewers. That should bump real quick in the next like 3 minutes. I'll be right back. How we doing? Okay, I said 3 minutes. What are we up to? 13 bodies. Only 10 have signed the roll. So if the other three of the I'll call for the roll again here in a minute. Okay, and we got the live audio for those that the roll. So Nathaniel, the roll is the roll is basically acknowledging yourself. Did I say no? So ROLL, man, come on, hang on. Isn't that what we call that? No, ROLE is a role that you play. Uh, can we? Anybody want to like drop a link, a confirmatory, chapter and verse sort of link? I mean, it is confusing, right? Thank you English for being super ambiguous about how we spell things. But within which we capture all of the etymological roots, which is beautiful, right? So, you know what I mean. You know the story. Which is why when the French knight in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, a.k.a. John Cleese, refers to him as his silly English Kniggets, it's actually accurate ancient Old English pronunciation back before it all went silent, but stuck around with the GH. Why? Cool though. Okay, so we have settled the roll factor, I think. Thank you, Erica. What do we got? Yeah, man. A list of names or related items. ROLL, man. Yeah, man. Okay. Okay, so hey everybody. So number one, everybody sign the roll, which is done by dropping a comment in the chat. And if you could do that sort of nowish, that would be great. Otherwise, I have to wind up like scouring the hour and 20-minute broadcast looking to see if anybody made a comment. So I'll make a call a little later, but let me see. So I talked to Tyler yesterday, and we should have, I think, most of the grading kind of caught up. What you'll notice is, well, for those of you that are stuck not doing the last Java project, because you're terrified because I put the fear in you, I just want to say we're trying to be, I want you to have a good experience. I want you to take it seriously. I want you to have a serious experience. But we're not trying to like ream anybody. This is new territory. I'm trying to give you the lectures on data and that sort of thing. But just take your best crack. If we really don't like it, I'll throw it back at you. And we're trying to be liberal with the grading on that project. So down the stretch, does everybody have a sense of what it is we got to do to get out of this thing? Do I have a sense? What's your sense down the stretch? Let me pull it up real quick. I think it's really about, let me swing this over here and make it big. Yeah, so hang on a second. That's readable, right? That's readable for you guys through the stream, I hope. I can go one more just to be on the safe side. Yeah, so where we're at right now is what you have to do down the stretch, post spring break, you've got to watch the Parameters podcast, and that counts as attendance for that podcast. We're going to finish the logic programming paradigm today or Thursday. Thursday's going to be, my goal is for Thursday to be the end of it. As far as us getting together, there'll be some things you guys need to wrap up. It is the readings for prologue, 19, 20, 22, and the homework for prologue, homework 7, 8, 9, okay? Which is mostly do the prologue tutorial is really what that is, mostly. And then this one has a little bit of parameters, that homework 9. And then the project 3 prologue, which we've already talked about. And then it's just kind of like, let's do one last kind of midterm / final. Kind of it'll be midterm 2. And I'm trying to figure out the best way. So first of all, am I missing anything or getting anything wrong as far as you're aware? Or does that seem accurate? It feels accurate anyway. What say you, my friends? And also tell me if suddenly my audio, hang on. No, Eric, I cannot hear you. Hang on. Okay, let me try that. Erica, can you say something? Yeah, I can hear you now. Wow. This is every time, man, on this Discord chat. Yeah, they still have the prologue project at the end. What? Well, I probably don't. Let me look. Oh, it's because this is not the one we're doing. Yeah, that would explain it. Might explain it. Is that one locked? No. That's blah, blah, blah. And I don't know if I did. No, you know what it is? What it is, it's basically a mod on one of these project days because we're not doing the project day. So thank you for that reminder. Really, really appreciate it. And I will get that fixed today. Basically, it's kind of what we talked about just as a pointer. This is not like a replacement. I'll get the thing updated. But, I'm going to, we did a little bit in the lectures, right, and we'll come back to finishing the prologue lecture, about kind of the pedigree genealogy, kind of thing. And this is the one where you're basically going to enter data about your own family. And so it becomes a lot more meaningful. You get little bit more of that kind of visceral emotional reaction. And if any of that visceral emotional reaction is negative, you can just exclude those people from your database. You know what I mean? It's up to you as to how you know what I mean? How you craft all that, right? If you want to have a special category for just a-holes, you can put people there. You can do whatever you want with your data, right? And then you're going to just start with the basic rules and, expand it from there. And I seriously thought I had actually already done that. I don't know. Yeah. Anyway, but I will make, it was probably going to be, I don't know, I'm so confused. Because I really thought I had done it, and I'm a big doof. You already know that. Okay, but I will get that project fixed today. Yeah, you bet. Okay. No, I'm seriously confused. Maybe it's just we talked about it, so it's like in my head, it was like, yeah, we dealt with it. That's probably what happened. Okay. Will the final be done before the project? I don't know how we're going to do the final, Devin, the other. I don't know. And I can take some we can take some advice about that. One approach is that we do the regular kind of Canvas exam. That's actually, it's nice from a grading perspective. just because it's bite-sized, it's typed, it's right there. You know, it comes in a way that I expected. A lot of times you guys do goofy things like, you know, whatever, just not put your name on things, or, you know, it's like middle school all over again. And you know what I'm saying. There's some advantage. The alternative is something like, you know, a kind of a take-home written, you know, kind of a thing. The problem with that is there is a strong temptation to go into, you know, I read this on the interwebs mode, you know, and I really hate having to hunt around for who's borrowing from the interwebs, you know. So doing something like, are you guys doing any like Canvas quizzes with Proctorio? I'm doing that in 2810 because I have no choice, but I've heard really mixed reviews about Proctorio. Yeah. Anyway, that's another angle. But anyway, I'll probably do, I'm kind of leaning toward a Canvas quiz, but I can do something like, you know, open it up and just kind of have it be available, you know, for a decent window of time. I just want to be accommodating because I just know everybody's a bit disrupted. So, and I'm with you, Nathaniel. Proctorio also not my favorite. And if we do it like, so Jake suggests, if we do it like the midterm, you know, that is kind of, that's pretty much where I'm headed with this, is something like that. Yeah, Proctorio is a virus you can send to. Nice, nice. And so no, Cameron, aka student, no midterm, not this week. No. What I'm saying is, I would make this final midterm / final just open like through finals week or something. You know what I mean? Through some window of time, so you can just kind of like, the mood is right, boom, you hit it. You know, that's what I'm trying to go for there, to just really make it easy on you. You know, within the bounds of logistics. Okay, we got 24 viewers right now, which is definitely critical mass. Could anybody who has not signed the roll, aka just made a comment in the YouTube live, so I can see that you're here, would you please do that? And if it is not immediately clear from your username who you are, then would you please clarify with enough information? You don't have to give all your information, but with enough, you know, information to identify you. All right. I'm talking to you, Fleet, and who else am I talking to? Only that. Okay, only Fleet. Okay. Any other questions? Either voice channel or Discord chat or YouTube chat. I'll try to lean away from Proctorio. Okay, just FYI, I don't prefer it. I know why it's a thing. You guys are seniors, for the most part, and you know better. Anyway. Okay. Anything else? And can I hear you guys? Thank you. Thank you, Matt. I heard that. Okay, interesting. I've got a couple of, I've got on the Discord chat, I've got a couple of Ammons, and you don't, this is not about changing your behavior, okay, you guys, but who not only have the mics muted, which everybody does, which is good, but the headphones deafened, which may mean that you're listening and just tracking via YouTube, which then kind of raises the question, why be on the voice channel in Discord? Maybe there's an answer to that. You can enlighten me. Okay, I'm ready to bop. Devin the other is typing, and I am jumping over to wrap up our lecture about metrics, so we can be done with that. Where is it? Which one do I want to do? Yeah, okay. So I think we got all the way. I remember what we did. We got all the way to this. Let me see. All right. But I'm assuming we got no more. Okay, thank you, Travis. I thought it was you, Travis. I just wasn't sure. Um, okay, I just want to pound this out and get done with this part on the data stuff. Okay, so Dallin mentioned, yeah, attendance doesn't look like it's been updated. And are we making up for doing anything to make up for the prologue in class, like the project days? And the answer on the second one is no. We're not gonna do anything about it. I'll just give you, whatever. I'll just adjust in a way that doesn't hurt your grade. And as for attendance, I thought they were updated, but I will double check. And the way we're doing attendance is via comments. So, all right. So, okay, I'm putting it right here in my to-do list. Okay. Da-da-da-da. Yeah, this is my to-do list, believe it or not. It's one of my to-do lists. Okay. Alrighty, let's talk about just metrics. This is kind of like down the stretch. We've done a lot of talk about just data and measurement and you know what I mean. What do we call it? Lies, damned lies, and statistics, right? And we've talked about kind of lying with numbers and the difficulty of trying to make sense of the world. And answering questions like which memory management is the proper approach. So I want to wrap up these few slides, and then I want to talk about memory management. Okay. And then just make sure, let me see, Ben, can you mute your mic? And then thank you very much, sir. Okay. All right, Ammon. All right. Okay. Thank you, Emin, for the explanation. And for whoever made the plea, please let's not use Proctorio. I'm going to make a deal here. I'm not going to use Proctorio. Okay. I don't prefer it anyway. And I'm just going to also make a note to myself. No Proctorio. Okay. Let's talk about some metrics, and then I have a couple of graphics I want to show you. And I mentioned, actually, hold on. I have to grab a book. Hold on. For when we get to the numbers part, and I want to show you a couple graphics. And then we'll pivot back over to Prolog. Talk about logic programming. Okay, so common metrics. These are common metrics in the software space. Okay, we've talked about other spaces. And this is one of the interesting things. So lines of code, you know what that is. But the question is, what does it mean, right? And that is a difficult problem, and it doesn't have a clean answer, right? We talked, and what I'm hoping you got out of all this so far is, remember there's 4 scales we talked about, okay? Right? Nominal scale, where it's like demographic buckets, Utahns versus Californians, what even that means, right? Nominal scale, ordinal scale. Ordinal reminds you of order, so they're ordered, but there's no consistent spacing. Student, SRIs are ordinal scale, right? And we talked about ways to do statistical malpractice with ordinal numbers, like taking the mean. Then comes interval scales, and the interval scales are where the distance is the same. And then finally, there was a ratio scale where there's an absolute 0, so that you can actually talk about ratios. This is half of that, and it actually makes some sense, right? So that's the first thing we talked about. Then we talked about the fact that there's direct data, direct information, and indirect, right? And the direct is what I can actually know. How many scraps of paper on my desk I can count. And indirect are the things that are much, much harder to know, like, should we do what behavior, right? And again, in the middle of this pandemic, some perfect examples of people freaking out who do not understand data, okay? Trevor, can you mute your mic? Thank you very, very much. Thank you. And we talked about the fact that the direct was what you didn't need and the indirect was what you actually needed. So that what you really, really needed, you couldn't directly measure. And we're always extrapolating from some, what the indirect thing from something direct, right? Hey, no problem, Trevor. And then we talked about subjective versus objective, right? Where objective means we all line up as long as we're all rational and we say, how many chairs in the room, and we each count, we get the same number. If we don't get the same number when we all attempt to count the very same thing, then it's not objective, okay? And what you see in that is a lot of moving parts. And then when you realize that most of what we actually have is subjective, indirect, and, who knows what scale, right? And so that's why even when you start, again, in the middle of the pandemic, you start counting things like deaths. It's not objective. Or it can only be well, it can't be objective. Well, it can be objective as long as you apply a standard, nah, even then, the problem is there's always wiggle room in judgment calls. Always, 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 really. What was the cause of death? You know what I mean? And then you get, anyway, everything we're dealing with in this pandemic informationally is subjective and indirect. And we're trying to make decisions. And people freak out like people are supposed to know things, like government is supposed to know and the scientists are supposed to know. And again, I just want to say one other thing, just a quick rant about science. The classic nit goes something like this: science is about knowing. I say bullcrap. Especially if you go, science is about knowing and religion is about faith. No, that's actually not true. Speaking about the science is about knowing certain things and then about extrapolating to faith about other things. If the scientists say everybody stay in their houses because we're going to beat this virus, and the models suggest, you don't know because it's the future, right? It involves, as I say about software estimation, it involves only two variables. Should be easy: people and the future. And so when you have something like a model suggests that if we do this, this will happen, and then we all act on it, that's faith, okay? And it's faith based on belief. So science is about knowledge. It's about theory. It's about speculation. It's about cynicism. It's about skepticism. It's about belief and faith and action in the face of incomplete information and incomplete knowledge. So science isn't strictly all about knowing things. That's bullcrap. That's absolute bullcrap. Science is about understanding the best we can. Read Thomas Kuhn, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, and it will create a revolution in your head. It is also the classic thing. Okay, relating to that, and it relates very strongly to Kuhn, relative to models, right? We're talking a lot about models right now in the middle of the pandemic. All models are flawed. I don't know if I said this last time. All models are flawed. Some are useful. Now, some are more flawed than others too, right? I mean, some have, and every flaw is a threat to validity. And a threat to validity is something that if you do everything perfectly, there are certain things you can't get past, right? That you can't nail it all the way down because of the limits to empiricism, okay? The limits to experimentation. We could never do empirical experimentation on like tobacco to determine whether tobacco causes cancer. I mean, we all believed it, really, but you can't get a bunch of people to sign up and then have a control group that's assigned not to smoke and a treatment group that is assigned to smoke for 40 years. So you wind up having to extrapolate from existing data, and it is brutally difficult to extrapolate from existing data when you're trying to understand something. It takes a tremendous propensity of evidence to be able to do that with confidence. Okay. Anyway, so what I'm saying is all models are flawed. All metrics are flawed. Okay. So when everyone's like, and again, in the middle of this pandemic, if you hear anybody, or if you are this person, and you can know that this is not a good play, when you hear people like, that model is flawed. Every model is flawed, and some are useful. That's it. Every metric is flawed, and some are useful. Let's talk about lines of code. Lines of code is a brutally flawed metric, but it turns out that if we're writing in the same language, and we're both writing device drivers, let's say, and we're both writing them in C, and we're both writing them for the same operating system, right? But you're writing the device driver for, an 802.11, Wi-Fi transceiver, and I'm writing the device driver for, Bluetooth device driver, right? I don't even know which one's more complex. Probably the Wi-Fi, maybe, I'm not even sure, okay? But it's entirely feasible that one of them, so we're talking about, we're device drivers, same OS, same platform, same language, right? And the question is, which of us is more productive? If we were both writing the same device driver and it took me twice as long and the code was very similar, you might be tempted to say that I'm about half as effective as the next person who wrote it in half the time, right? Right, and so Emin points out lines of code can still be different with the same language because someone with more experience could maybe have fewer lines of code. Maybe they're more efficient. Or they write, one person's more concerned with maintainability. So they write, and the code is actually slightly puffier, right? Because they write for maintainability. Another person doesn't write for maintainability, so it's terse, difficult to comprehend and grok, right? And so how, that sort of personality, one of them used to be a tester. And so one of them is writing it in a way that leaves it very testable, but you've got to put certain things in there so I can throw a switch. One of them is writing for instrumentation, right? I'm going to instrument my code so that we can throw a switch, recompile it, run it, and I can do profiling of what's going on, right? And that could be very, very valuable. But if I wrote my code with profiling and you didn't, my code's going to be fatter and it's going to take me longer. And if we wrote exactly the same thing and I took longer, you might, if you don't know anything, you might be tempted to conclude that, Chuck's just a worse programmer. I might actually be the better programmer because I'm actually thinking about things like testing and profiling and things like that the other person wasn't even thinking about. They can be sort of quicker. Here's another one. Good comments. Matt and who else was that? Ammon. Here's another one. If you ever try to write a book, I've written a few books. If you ever try to write a book, if you know a ton about the space and you write the same, let's say you and I both write 200 pages on some topic. If I know 10 times more than you, it will take me much, much longer to write my 200 pages than you. Because when you write, and I'm just using me and you as a metaphor, it could be, let's swap it, right? Whoever the expert is. The expert's going to take longer because she has to throw away more, okay? There's that old expression, I've forgotten more than you'll ever know, or than you've ever known, right? The expert really has, at some level. And so the expert has to noodle through everything, and just it just slows you down. And then somebody else that only knows 5 things just thinks that's the whole world, writes the 5 things, spends 200 pages, and doesn't know why it's taking you so long. So I'm just saying that even when we tried to narrow it all the way down, right? Same platform, language, OS, task, device drivers, blah, blah, blah. And even if we don't vary what it is we're writing a device driver for, then lines of code can vary all over the map, okay? But I think we can say this with some confidence. This is the usefulness. If I tell you I wrote 20,000 lines of C, and you're working in the very same environment, in a very same kind of a sort of an arena, and you write 2,000 lines, I did create 10 times more code, and all things being equal, mine was a bigger task. At that level, yeah, and I've got 10 times, thanks, man. I got 10 times the bugs probably, right? And maybe even more expansive than 10x, right? So what I'm trying to say is that lines of code is actually useful. We did a paper when I was running the Sequoia lab at BYU that was dealing with lines of code as a metric, the efficacy of lines of code as a metric. And it turns out to be a horrible, horrible metric that is useful. And in many respects, because of the way things kind of normalize when taken in large enough numbers, it turns out to be fundamentally flawed and just about the best thing we've got. So all models are flawed. Some are useful. Lines of code is actually useful. Cyclomatic complexity is one that was created by McCabe. Do I have, I think I have a, no, that was McCall. Sorry, I got my mix confused. Cyclomatic complexity was proposed by McCabe. And the idea behind cyclomatic complexity was you could look at code and automatically sort of figure out like what the cycles were. In other words, it was a way of trying to gauge how complex your code was. If you wrote 100 lines and I wrote 100 lines and yours just went, no cycles, like do this, do this, do this, do this, you're done. And mine was like da-da-da, da-da-da, conditions, branching, right? And bopping around and for loops and other kinds of stuff. We would say same number of lines of code, but we would say mine was more complex. And indeed, it is more complex. Also way harder to test, mine is. But it turns out there's some struggles. McCabe also postulated that in modules with higher cyclomatic complexity, there was a greater propensity to find bugs. So useful in that respect. The truth is it never really caught on in a big way. But it's just to give you an example. Other metrics, things like, bugs per 1,000 lines of code. That has to be known bugs. It can't be number of bugs, right? In the same way of like we talked about, right? Known positive tests for coronavirus, total number of actual cases. The first can be known and has all these caveats. The second cannot be known. The second is what you really want to know, but you can't know it. You could know it conceptually. You would need, 330 million tests in the US like per week. So it's not practical. It's not going to happen. Okay. Other things. Time to write a module. How long did it take you? Okay, right? Objective or subjective? You know that's subjective. Yeah, you know that's subjective. It's also indirect, isn't it? I mean, for the most part, I think it's indirect because it's almost generally not what you really, really want. If you could say to somebody, look, you do the one thing, and if you succeed at the one thing, that's worth $10,000 to us. And then they do that thing in 5 minutes and you go, whoa, you're not rethinking whether their 5 minutes is worth it. Because the truth is there are a lot of people that can do things in 5 minutes that every one of us can never, ever do in our entire lives. Right? I mean, I'm just start with athletics. You know what I mean? Let's go with, throw a football 75 yards, which is like every NFL quarterback, basically. And that's a long distance to throw a football. Probably every one of us, if we had the rest of our lives to train for it, probably still couldn't, out-throw Tom Brady. It's not going to happen. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is you're trying to ask yourself, what is it worth it, right? And that metric becomes, anyway, they just become really, really challenging. Okay. Here are some things that McCall, who was another researcher, proposed as quality metrics, metrics for quality. Now, here's what's interesting about these metrics. McCall's quality metrics, on balance, don't get used, okay? And that's not because, because, again, all metrics are flawed. But they're useful. They're useful conceptually. For example, reliability, there's certain definitions. Every one of these has its own definitions. Maintainability. You write code and it can't be maintained. I'll show you a company or a product that's dead the first time you have to tweak something. What is YAGNI, Ammon? I don't know the acronym, which you will now enlighten me about. You ain't gonna need it. Nice. That's new to me. Thank you. And hang on, do we have, hang on a second. Oh, Martin Fowler, very nice. Yeah, here's what Ammon just shared. By the way, this is something we cannot do in the classroom, right? There we go. Cost of building, cost of repair, cost of carry, cost of delay. Anyway, it's new term to me, so I've got to do the read. But that's the thing that Ammon was talking about on the Discord chat. So anyway, link is in there. Link is in there on Discord. We can maybe check. I'll give it a read later on. Okay. Okay. Where are we at? Come on. Oh, I know what I need to do. Just a second. I got to do a thing. What happens is when I've got a screen that's over on the extra display, and then my PowerPoint slides go over the top of it, then it like freezes out my ability to use any of the other just Chrome, just tabs, which I use in part to track any comments that are popping on the live feed. All right. Okay. All right. Anyway, that's McCall. So I'm just trying to say, this is interesting because you ask yourself when you're building software, is it portable? Can I move it from platform to platform? Is it reusable, right? Can I grab the code and use it in some other way? Is it interoperable with different systems? Is it maintainable? Can I touch it later without breaking it, right? Is it fragile? Is it brittle, right? Is one of the terms. Is it testable? You can write code in a way that makes it more or less testable, right? Is it usable? Is it efficient? Is it reliable? Is it correct? All of these are metrics you can talk about, okay? And every one of those, you realize that then it's like, okay, and this is right on the money again with all this stuff we've been talking about with memory management and now analyzing whether you should use a certain language. How do I measure it? What am I measuring? Is what I'm measuring telling me what I actually want to know? Is it, in fact, legitimately supporting the conclusions I'm drawing? Again, a lot of that going on, badly. Some well, but a lot badly out there today in the world of our pandemic. Okay, and then McCall suggested that there were these indirect measures of quality factors. Again, it's we could talk about this for a couple of hours, okay? And what do they even mean? Modularity, security, boom, blow security up, you know what I mean? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I just wanted to kind of say that in the field of software, there's been a lot of study about metrics. Design metrics like coupling and cohesion, fan in, fan out, function points, object points, blah, 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 blah. And an understanding of how you look at this kind of data can do, an understanding of that can guide you, okay? And then here was really the last thing that I wanted to just show you. This is a little Dilbert for the soul about how metrics influence behavior. So we want to write bug-free software, $10 bonus for every bug you find and fix. You're telling this to the developers, right? He goes, I hope this drives the right behavior. And then Wally goes, I'm going to write me a new minivan this afternoon, right? So it's like, you got to really understand like what you're doing. What the idea that if you attach metrics and then you reward people based upon those metrics, you will drive behavior. Okay? That's basic economics right there. You will drive behavior. Okay. Let me jump. So that's my sort of improv lecture series on how to read, how to understand data. I want to show you this. This is the book I think I told you about, The Visual Display of Quantitative Information by Edward Tufte. This book, it is kind of a weird, boring looking cover. The title is Boring Crazy. There's Tufte himself right there. It almost looks like he's wearing a tux, but he's got like a jacket over a collared shirt with the collar open and a t-shirt anyway. But it almost looks like he's in a tux. This book is one of my all-time legendary, amazing, changed my life kind of books. And not only from the perspective of like being a researcher and publishing, right, in ways that are intelligent, but also in being a consumer, okay, of graphics, of data. And Tufte has an article. There are 4 books. I'm looking at them. They are called Beautiful Evidence, Visual Explanations, and I just can't see that far. I can't even read it. Sorry, I'd have to get up. To look close. It's too far away. The print's too small on the spine. Tufte wrote a paper. First of all, he wrote a paper about the Challenger disaster, and in this paper, he essentially says that PowerPoint essentially causal. We got to be cautious about using terms like causality. But he basically just said that PowerPoint was a contributor to the Challenger disaster because of the inefficient conveyance of critical information, the ability to hide critical information, whether you intended to or not. He also wrote an entire piece on PowerPoint, okay, and just kind of like now, and he's not saying that one can never use PowerPoint or that PowerPoint as a product is bad. He's not saying that, in my opinion. I don't think he's saying that. He is saying that if you don't think about what you're doing with PowerPoint as a tool, then you create a problem, okay? Which led to this classic cartoon, comic, whatever you want to call this thing, which in my research labs has always become, kind of a legendary. I'm gonna actually, nope. Hang on. I'm just gonna drop this into the Discord chat as well, just in case anybody wants it. Right? Every time you make a PowerPoint, Edward Tufte kills a kitten. So we would go to conferences and workshops, right? And then with this comic as our guide, we would literally use the number of kittens that Edward Tufte had to kill, as a metric, as our metric for how bad or good, the use of PowerPoint was. And there would be some where we would be like, no kittens were killed in the making of this presentation. And then other, wait, what are you talking about, Michael? This guy on the right? Right? I think, yeah, that guy, well, it's because of what's happening over here. He's being driven to it by this PowerPoint presentation. Everybody at the table is bored and Tufte's over there killing kittens. So we would do things like, that was a 7 kitten presentation, or, you know what I mean? Tufte, basically had to blow up an entire, animal shelter, because of this PowerPoint presentation. Just trying to gauge just how brutally difficult, how brutal some of these presentations are. You know what I'm talking about. And yeah, well, Michael, the person lying down in the chair is just dying from the presentation. I think that's what's happening. Anyway, so there's that. And then so Tufte, if you want to just enhance your world in a big, big way, just acquire the visual display of quantitative information and read it. Okay. Now I want to show you just a couple of examples from Tufte of, good information, bad information, okay? So there's this one, I showed this in 3450, but basically there's an article here, and the article is about, what is it? Franked male tie to voting shown. That's a goofy headline. It's trying to say, I don't even know what franked means, but it's basically trying to say that Congress, who has free mail services, is basically using their free mail services to their advantage to seek re-election. The humanity, nobody saw that coming. And 700 words, or this graphic that goes, these are election years. Now this is what's so great. You're like, well, what about, I look at this, right? And I see, hope that's big enough for you. I look at that and I see these spikes, right? That are clearly jumping up here, right? In October of 68, 1970, 1972. And then my first thought when I see that, so first of all, you're just like, boom, those are election years. What? That's October. What happens in November? Elections. And then the other thought is, well, it doesn't mean anything if you don't compare it with off election years. Where's the off election years? You're like, it's right there, okay? The off election years, so there's the end of 68. Okay, here's the end of 69, right? In the noise. The end of 67 is actually dropping. The end of 72, dropping, And then we're ramping up. So there's all of an election year, right? The second half of if you just take that spike on the right, okay, and you just take the second half of it, that's the election year volume. That's the non-election year volume. So you see that. You also see the spike in October, okay? Anyway, one of these sort of, evidentiary rationales for why incumbents have a tremendous advantage, okay? And it turns out, franked mail, okay, yeah, thank you, Erica. Franked mail is mail sent from a congressperson to their constituents to communicate official business. The original political mail. Nice. Anyway, this graphic actually helps to illustrate one of the reasons why I am I don't talk a lot about politics. I am a passionate proponent of term limits. And it really, for me, is fundamentally about balanced playing field. The balanced playing field is really what it's about. The ability to send out that much mail with your official letterhead and you as the congressperson to everybody in your district as you run for re-election, that is, in my view, that's an unspeakable advantage to whoever the challenger is. And that's why incumbents win re-election at an absurd rate, like 90%. It's one of the reasons why, not to mention other things. Anyway, I'll reveal this political persuasion to you. I am for term limits in the strongest way possible. Okay. I don't know what the strongest way possible means, but I am intensely in favor of term limits. And it really is independent of anything other than that unequal playing field in the political arena. Okay, so that's one graphic, that Tufte. These are all scans out of Tufte, okay? This next one I want to show you is that one's an example of a brilliant graphic. This is an example of not so brilliant, okay? I want to just ask you, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with this graphic? I'll just give you a minute. You tell me what's wrong with it while I have a sip. So Travis asks, is there anyone willing to admit that they're against term limits other than incumbents who are guilty by omission because they never do anything about it? Of course, there are incumbents who do things about it, but you can propose legislation. There are incumbents who have proposed legislation for term limits, constitutional amendment for term limits, like every single new Congress, basically. There are some. I have friends, Travis, who are just adamantly opposed to term limits. And I don't understand it. I mean, I respect them, but I don't understand it. Okay, look at this guy right here. Look at this. What's wrong with it? I'm waiting for a couple comments. Ideally, and I really love those that are willing to kind of jump in and drop your comments. If you aren't one of those people, just take a chance. Drop, you know what I mean? Don't just wait for, you know who they are. And if you're exclusively on YouTube Live, you can drop a comment there. I'm tracking those as well, even though there aren't any. And by the way, if anybody is now here, would you please sign the roll on the live chat on YouTube Live? Okay, so let's see. I want to just say one other thing about term limits. I don't think term limits should be a partisan issue. I do see some partisan lines, but I don't think it ought to be a partisan issue. Okay, what is wrong with this, my friends? What do we got? Yeah, so Nathaniel said it doesn't give us a full picture. We don't know the differences between each of these. Yeah, so Emma says you're pushing a perspective that the difference in size, that isn't with the difference in size that isn't accurate to the data. Yeah, and then other Ammon says the largest is 33% more than the smallest, but looks almost 3 times the size. Meaning what Emin's saying is that the number right here goes from 143 to 214, which is 67, right? So 67 is about, 50% larger? On the number, the problem, one of the problems, and Tufte talks about this, is whenever you're representing one-dimensional data with a two-dimensional graph. Then as that graph grows, so here's that graph, as it grows, right, you get a twofold increase. And you might only be measuring in one dimension, but you blow it up and you get a disproportionate feel, right? So Jake points out, no, this is great, so this is the annual cost per capita for the care of the insane this is from 1911 in Pittsburgh City Homes and Pennsylvania State Hospitals. And they have the different cities, right? And apparently, right, they're all the same insane asylum, right? But what about this one? So you can talk about from 147 to 214 is a 50% increase, but here you're doubling in like every dimension, basically, or more. Another thing that's weird about this is that emotionally, you're just looking at the house, but you actually get all the lawn for additional emotional impact. But what about this one? $213 for this insane asylum, $214. It's $1 difference. Like, it's $1 difference. If you had these two mansions, right, for rent, and they were identical except for size, and that one was $1 more, you'd take the deal. Anyway, this is horrible. This is horrible. Okay? Yeah. Anyway, so that's a good one. That's just a good, /bad one. And I just got one more, and then I want to jump over to Prolog or logic programming. Okay? Here's another one. And by the way, this is just some of the goodness you get from Tufte. You get an actual equation that talks about the lie factor, the size of the effect shown in the graphic as a ratio over the size of the effect in the data. Okay, so here you go. This is from the New York Times from 1978. Scout it. Okay, this is the fuel economy standards for autos. Okay, oh man, there's so much wrong about this. For starters, 78 is out. To me, when you look at a highway like that, the future is out there and the present is right here. And this is the past. You're starting from the past, way the heck out there, coming toward you and down and to the left. Time doesn't usually go down and to the left and toward you graphically. Time usually goes like left to right, or maybe away and up, kind of toward a horizon, from the horizon. So that's goofy. To me, it's all flipped. But then just the proportion. Look at the difference. We talked about interval scales, right? Interval scale where the gap between two things are the same. Well, the gap between 27 and 26 on fuel economy is the same gap as 26 to 25. It's 1 mile per gallon different. But what's going on here? Because of this perspective, look at the gap from 18 to 19 and the area in that trapezoid back there in 1978, 79. Look at that gap between 18 and 19, which it turns out is the same gap between 26 and 27. Right? And I don't even know what the point is, other than just, let's make a road. It's mileage. Let's use a road. And then 27 and a half. Then you also did the classic. You go 18, 19, 20, 22, but the 21 is there, but you don't label it. 24, you skip the 23. 26, you skip the 25, but then you include the 27, and you make it look like the biggest thing of all. And 27 and a half, it has everything wrong with it. Everything wrong. And then he does this thing, this line representing, now that's just on the way the thing changes. But if you just look at 18 versus 27, this line representing 18 miles per gallon is 0.6 inches long, and the one representing 27.5 miles, which is 9.5, which is about 50% more fuel economy, right? Which, if you kept it linearly, would be about 1 inch, 0.9, but instead it's 5.3 inches to represent a bump in the number. Crazy, 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 crazy. Anyway, this is partially I'm selling Tufte, okay? I'm unashamed about selling Tufte to you, okay? Okay, let me see. Any of the other comments? Right, yeah, so this notion that you're incorporating 3D perspective, no, do not incorporate. And I've seen, Tufte has a whole bunch of them with like price of oil with like barrels, which barrels are represented in like a 3-dimension, that's kind of 3-dimensional, but it's still kind of, 2-dimensional, but coming at you. Barrels that like with 3-dimensional depth, like the barrel, but all based upon a linear scale. Now you're cubing the effect, or people, but they're not tall. They represent like a 3-dimensional feel. Horrible. Anyway, seriously, this book will change your life. Really, really. It's probably a little spendy. I don't know what this costs, but I've had mine for a while. Back, it was probably $40 back then. It doesn't say on the scan code on the ISBN. Okay. All right. So Ammon had also pointed out, we want to appear to be progressing. We want that progression to seem dramatic. What the person was probably thinking. My own theory about that, Ammon, because we don't know what the person was thinking, right? And that's, I think, very important. I want to say this too about the current, just last thought while I'm pulling up our logic programming lecture. One of the biggest things we do wrong when we project out, we've got our incomplete data. I didn't even talk about complete versus incomplete, right? Full population versus sample, what the nature of the incompleteness is. I didn't even talk about that. I probably should. But I just want to say that one of the things that I see as the greatest, most heinous crime of misinterpreting data. Thank you for those points, for those links, you guys. One of the most heinous crimes, crimes against data, is extrapolating what somebody thinks. I'm not trying to pick on you, Ammon, because I just see it so much, but trying to extrapolate what somebody thinks from the data. Well, you know what so-and-so, all they're trying to do. No, you don't know that. I mean, really, seriously, truly, independent of your perspective, you don't know that that's what they're trying to do. Now, it's possible that they might be, and it's possible that they might not be. So, yeah, this is a straw man argument. Matt and I were talking a little bit about the other day about Iron Man arguments, right? Which is like, no, represent your opponent's perspective or the view that you don't, instinctively agree with. Represent it in its strongest possible form. Now address it. Now go after it. Way more impressive. Anyone who sets up a straw man, and if you don't know the term, a straw man argument, so Emmett said straw man arguments are convincing to non-educated audiences. True. They're also convincing where there exists confirmation bias, where you want so badly to believe that thing that as soon as the meme comes through, your meme is very powerful, right? Hang on a second. I had something and I don't know. Yeah. You see this, right? And because you have confirmation bias, you want to believe, so you're willing to overlook all of the threats to validity, right? And really, seriously, they didn't have Photoshop back then, so don't say it was Photoshopped. Okay. All right. Yeah. So that's your homework assignment, is to challenge somebody, yourself, if it's yourself, and then if you're already good at this, challenge somebody who is who has been willing in some public setting to talk about what people are thinking. You don't know what people are thinking. You really, really don't. And who, just look for it. Look for it. Well, there's that whole, right, and suddenly it's like Thanksgiving all over again with your crazy uncle. Or maybe it's your dad. Maybe it's your mom. Maybe it's you. Well, they only do that because, anyway, okay. When last we met and talked about prologue, you ready for this? Because I want to wrap. I want to get out the other side so we can talk about the final, talk about stuff. We'll get a little more of this Thursday. I want Thursday to be the last day. Everybody good with that? Everybody good? I am. You know what? I don't even care if you're good with it. I'm good with it. and I get to do whatever I want to do here. And so I'm good with it. Let's do it. Thursday, I'll talk about the midterm/final. I'll have something cooked up by then. I'm going to ask you questions about the data stuff. And did I post the slides? I'm posting a reminder to post the slides. The slides from the lectures that I've been doing about data stuff. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Ammon, if you wouldn't. Oh, I did. Thank you, Erica. Okay, good. Let me get rid of that. Thank you. Okay. I just assume I forgot everything. Okay. Yeah. So Devin, the other. Yes, we would do the review online like we did last time. And we'll do that on Thursday. Meaning that we'll talk about it. I'll kind of tell you what to expect. I'll try to drop a study sheet out there for you like we did last time. You guys did pretty darn well, if I recall, on that last midterm. And I'd like to see you do similarly well here. So, yeah. Okay. We got, 5 minutes or so. Let's see. There aren't that many slides actually here in our logic paradigm. Okay. I think we got to this one, right? Where we talked about the logic paradigm, the logic programming paradigm. That prologue was kind of almost like the only thing in that space. And that I felt like, whoa, what happened? Oh, I know what happened. My stupid Mac keyboard happened. I have problems with this thing. Well, it has to do with the fact that there is a touch screen escape key. And so instead of a full tactile escape key, so you can just your finger just glances across it, boom, escape. I think it's bad design. Okay. So I think there's a case to be made for SQL as another logic programming. Okay. And some people talk about, database languages, and that's fair, right? That kind of landscape. How does the programming language landscape change? You know a lot about that by now. Here's some things that they have in common, Prolog and SQL. They are both largely declarative. You, for the most part, don't tell you how to do what you do. they both establish sort of known facts in the way of intermediate tables, intermediate results. With SQL, you actually state your facts. And you do that with Prolog, just with SQL, by just putting data in tables as well. In fact, I jumped the gun when I talked about derivation. That's really the next part, which is I can do derivation if I have facts, rules of inference, then I can create some additional information. That additional information then can become foundational for the next rev or whatever. I can do things like, do a query in SQL, right? I'm looking for, in certain tables, right, where there's some particular condition holds, and then I can actually push that out as a table. I can then use that table, for other things. And really the same thing happens in Prolog, where I, once I've got things like, I can create my definition of certain relationships based on other things, and they become essentially the same basis as facts, even though they might just be, they're derived basically. Anyway, you got the idea. I think we may have talked about that. They both share a preoccupation with performance because they will both kick your butt with performance if you're not careful. With SQL, the intermediate operations, right? You get these joins and reductions that'll impact efficiency. Sometimes just a big join just blows up your memory. With Prolog, it has to do with infinite backtracking. You're trying to do this backtracking to crawl the space, and you can, if you don't build structures, they call them cuts in Prolog, then you can backtrack sort of infinitely or way too much. So we do actually care about that. Okay. So this is the fundamental punchline of the imperative of the logical paradigm. And I'm trying to see, man, we're so close. I just want to see something. Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out. Let's come back to this. I want to just end on this one then. And I just want to say, and we'll come back to this very slide, but that this is what the logic paradigm, a logical program has. There are facts, we'll sometimes call them axioms. There are rules of inference, and there are queries. That is the foundation. If you think about object-oriented, a good exam question might be, in the logic programming paradigm, programs consist of these things, right? Facts or axioms, rules of inference, and queries. If I said, okay, now do imperative, what would you say an imperative program fundamentally consists of? How about an object-oriented paradigm? What would you say it fundamentally consists of? Good question. So chew on that, noodle on that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to come back on Thursday. I think we're good right now. I did that right, yeah, 9:45. We'll come back to this very slide. There's 18 slides, so there's like 5 slides left. And we'll just talk a little more about logic programming. We'll talk about the midterm. I'll get a study guide up. I add that to my to-do list. And that is good. And I'll get that stuff up by Thursday. And then we'll be done. And then we can do, whatever. It's homework day. Homework day next Tuesday and Thursday. Come, jump online if you want to grab me, etc. Okay, I am good. For today. Everybody take care. Stay safe. I'm reading Matt's last comment. While everybody's dropping off, I'm just looking at Matt's imperative. An explicitly denoted cookbook that instructs you how exactly to tilt your head while shaking 3.94567 grams of Mediterranean salt onto your precisely 49 ounces of chicken at 70. Yeah. Well, yeah, there's a lot of detail missing, Matt, so that's all I have to say about that. Okay, my friends, if you did not sign the roll, that's a fairly short list. on the comments on the chat stream for YouTube Live. So please do that. And that will be fantastic. Okay, everybody. Take care. Stay safe. Good luck wrapping up everything in your semester. Holler if you need anything from me, okay? I'll be on Discord. Thanks, Hammond. You're welcome, Jake. Travis, I will